Good afternoon. We're going to get started. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Again, my name is Shioni Flegel. I'm the Executive Director here at Housing California. I hope you have enjoyed your day. I know we have. I've been thinking a lot about the conversation we started this morning with Dr. Manuel Pastor. One of the things he reminded us is to think about not the economy, but our economy. And I think for those of us in the housing world, we can apply that same orientation to our housing system. We talk about the housing system and the things it is producing, some of them wonderful and some of them not so wonderful. It's really our housing system to continue to develop and evolve so that it serves all of our communities in the ways that we want to serve them. We're going to dig into that topic a little bit this afternoon with a phenomenal group of friends and colleagues as we think about how we really bolster our state government to deliver a different set of outcomes to our communities. Before we dive into the plenary, I want to review a couple housekeeping items. We look forward to seeing you all at the welcome reception immediately following the plenary. It's going to be across the hall in Hall B. You have a drink ticket on the back of your name badge, so bring that with you. I also want to let folks know that everyone is invited to join us at Hauser's After Dark, sponsored by Icon National at Cafeteria 15L. That starts at 9 p.m. Bring your badge there too. That's your ticket for entry. Finally, I want to take a moment to thank U.S. Bank for serving as our title sponsor for this plenary. U.S. Bank has been a phenomenal partner and supporter of Housing California for many years. Please enjoy the following video while Lisa Gutierrez, Director for Business Development for Affordable Housing for U.S. Bank, joins us on the stage for a few remarks.
We're so pleased to have you with us this beautiful day to celebrate the grand reopening of the Ambassador and Ritz hotels.
The Tenderloin has 30,000 residents. Most residents actually make an income of $15,000. U.S. Bank has funded TNDC since 2005.
I'm really excited to be here at the Ambassador and the Ritz as we have rehabilitated over 200 units. We want to thank U.S. Bank for being a partner in the work that we are doing here in the Tenderloin community of San Francisco. I see smiles, see excitement about the future. The Ambassador has a particularly special place in the history of San Francisco. Is that the previous generation of use for this building, there was a gentleman named Hank who operated the building, and he welcomed people who were living with AIDS in the 80s and the 90s when AIDS was very new and very scary.
We're so excited to be part of the Ambassador Ritz revitalization. I would say that Impact Finance loves a really hard development, and that's what the Ambassador Ritz was. U.S. Bancorp Impact Finance leans into the hard developments, and I think that's what differentiates us from the rest. So providing safe, clean, just, affordable housing in San Francisco, in California, and nationwide is really a true fundamental human right for individuals. Housing is truly the foundation to economic mobility and development. And we believe at U.S. Bank for over 35 years, we have been investing and lending in affordable housing. This is our passion.
I actually moved here right after they renewed the place. It's very important when you want to go home. You just want to be home in a good community, like living place that you like. Very important to have your own place, feel comfortable in it.
I see excitement about the future, and so it's great to be here in the Tenderloin community to celebrate this extraordinary milestone.
Well, thank you for indulging us in that video. That was definitely a labor of love. And shout out to TNDC. If anyone's in the room from TNDC, you truly were the champions there on that development. Thank you to Chioni, and good afternoon, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here amongst so many colleagues, friends, and industry advocates who share a strong passion for affordable housing. Again, I'm Lisa Gutierrez, Senior Vice President and Director of Business Development of Affordable Housing at U.S. Bancorp Impact Finance, which is a subsidiary of U.S. Bank that supports our affordable housing, economic development, environmental and historic restoration projects. For more than 35 years, we've mobilized capital to create financial, social, and environmental returns. We believe everyone deserves a place to call home. Since its founding, Impact Finance has invested over $4.5 billion in equity and provided over $7.5 billion in loans towards affordable housing projects in 46 counties across California. We've executed over 760 deals to finance the construction of over 61,768 housing units. In 2024, we gave more than $43 million in U.S. Bank Foundation grants and corporate contributions in California. Examples of organizations that have received U.S. Bank Foundation funding for affordable housing programs include Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services, Habitat for Humanity, Coachella Valley Housing Coalition, California Housing Consortium, Meta, East Bay Housing Organization, Abode Communities, and many more. Our industry is moving at a fast pace, and it's important for all of us to stay connected and be on the forefront of our industry. I've been energized at this year's conference and speakers and topics, and I'm excited about what's next on the agenda. With that in mind, it's now my privilege to introduce the afternoon's plenary, which will provide us with opportunity to hear from leaders across government, politics, organizing, movement building, and affordable housing development about challenging the status quo and bringing to fruition the dream of a California with homes, health, and prosperity for all thriving, sustainable communities. During this moderated discussion, you will learn how leaders are thinking of challenges and the pivotal role advocates play in shaping the future of housing and homelessness. Chione Flegel will facilitate the dialogue with our esteemed panel of state leaders and thinkers that have joined us today. Chione and the plenary speakers, please join me on stage. Thank you.
All right.
Break it up.
In the middle.
Ooh, it's soft.
Where was our walk-on music, Shani?
I requested music, actually.
Sorry, Shola. So, music at Hauser's After Dark this evening, dancing starring Joseph. We have a wonderful group of folks here today. We wanted to start this conversation at our conference this year because as we've been thinking at Housing California and with our partners about how we really scale our impact and deliver a different set of outcomes for communities, it's become clear that we need to be activating government at all levels in new and innovative ways. Today we're going to focus on the state specifically. We think there are some really incredible opportunities to reimagine how state government becomes a leader, an enabler, an enforcer, and an activator to deliver our housing vision for Californians so that we do have a future where every Californian has a safe, affordable place to call home. So I'm joined by some phenomenal friends and colleagues in this work, starting to my right, Veronica Lewis, who is the director at Topics, Joseph Tomas McKellar, who leads Pico, California, Shola Olatoya, the Chief Operating Officer at Eden Housing, and Libby Schaaf, the former mayor of my hometown, Oakland, as well as the HUD appointee to MTC and VAPA. Get this right. I'm going to have the panel get started by asking each of you, maybe starting with you, Libby, to reflect on what you think reimagining the state's role in affordable housing and homelessness could look like. What could we accomplish? What would be the key principles of state government that would help us work more effectively? And how does the current federal context create either new opportunities or challenges for delivering on that vision?
Well, it's very easy to focus on the challenges, and I think it's actually appropriate to really be in this moment of pain and chaos and to imagine a California that is exactly the opposite. I want to see a state system where the systems and the culture of government and, of the advocacy community is aligned without apology to outcomes. To start with the needs of the people that we have come here to serve as our North Star and build the systems up from there. And I think that I know people love talking about silo busting in government, but I'm going to say it again, silo busting in government. Because when you're a mayor, you sit at this altitude where you see the interconnectivity of everything. You see that it is hard to fix anything without fixing everything. And I feel like our government is not designed that way. That over the years, these layers of paint, these policies and programs layered on top of one another often work against one another and certainly create a dispersal towards getting to an outcome. Like, we have weaponized the word accountability. Is anybody else feeling that way right now? Accountability should be for outcomes, not for procedural compliance. I just want to give a quick experience in Oakland that I feel like illustrates that. When I first became the mayor, I think Heather Hood from Enterprise Community Partners is out there somewhere. She and Claudia Capio were the co-chairs of the Housing Cabinet. And we pulled together people that often did not sit at the same table. I mean, we had folks from ACE that were very passionate tenant rights advocates sitting next to like for-profit developers. Everyone came to this table and created a continuum, a basket, a menu of solutions, and then also ordered them, in the order of implementation to actually stop what was then, what I would say was a violent gentrification and displacement that was happening in my beloved hometown of Oakland. I am not saying we solved the problem, but the data shows that we absolutely changed it. We absolutely slowed that pain down through a menu of protecting tenants, preserving existing affordable housing and putting protections on those units where people were already living, and yes, producing more units. And I love that this kind of model was somewhat replicated at the regional level when we did the CASA process. And if there's one tool, like just a practical tool I want to leave people with, is at the end of the day, every member of that giant CASA consortium, and I mean, again, we had labor and nonprofits and different levels of government. It was a huge table, not quite as big as this room, but representing all the different components. And instead of making people vote for or against the totality of the compact, people were allowed to give it what they called a gradation of agreement. A 1 meant, I cannot live with this, I veto this, I hate it, I cannot live with it, the totality of it. 2 was, there's a lot that I do not like, but for the greater good, I can live with it. 3 was neutral, 4 was support but with some reservations, and 5 was, I love this shit. So to be able to cast a public vote that actually expressed something more complicated than just yes or no, because it really recognized that we have got to be together. We cannot continue to engage in this zero-sum mentality and fight with one another when at our federal government, our president is trying to destroy democracy, and a tech billionaire is trying to doge our most sacred institutions. We cannot afford infighting. We have to have that collective approach together.
What are you thinking about?
Sorry, we could just,
Use this one instead. Okay.
All of us, or just?
you have to just share
Okay.
Share them. Okay.
Some people more squeaky than others? No?
Okay.
It's all you, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start. First of all, thank you, Shioni, Housing California, for inviting me and the Eden team to be a part of this important conversation. My name is Shola Olatoye, COO of Eden Housing. We're a statewide affordable housing organization. And I think your question around what are the principles that we'd like to see the state government embrace in this moment, there are a couple of things. First, I want to acknowledge the work that many people in this room have done to finally begin to weave and interconnect the health and housing conversations, whether that's represented in Prop 1, CalAIM, or all of the work that is underway to increasingly house our medically vulnerable neighbors, right? That was a conversation that started probably 20, 25 years ago that we are now starting to see the benefits of, right? So there actually are things, when in a time when we're being told that government can't work, I'd like to point to those examples of, real innovations that have happened. And so I think that is sort of in the spirit of what we'd like to see the rest of the system do, right? I think, there is widespread agreement that our housing finance system at the state level is fractured. One part of the agency doesn't speak to the other. There are competing deadlines and criteria, all of the things that make it incredibly hard to deliver a unit for a family. And that is what we're doing. We are helping and housing families. And the public has said $1 million a unit is not acceptable. And so I think the proposal to create a better aligned one-stop housing finance agency is a really important step forward to force the level of efficiencies that we need so that we can produce more units for Californians. I think it's also super important for the components of this potentially new agency to look at the things that are cost drivers in our system, right? Whether that's the significant amount of time that we all spend around compliance, the significant amount of time around legal compliance. And so how can this potentially sort of one-stop agency help to address that, I think is super important. So one, I think, innovation can happen at the government level as evidenced by the work that's happening with Prop 1 and CalAIM. And so more of that, please. And then two, really trying to drive cost containment so that we can produce more units for our families. We have to accept that the system that we currently have is not working, right? And so it is not an acceptable place for us to continue to shout for more money. And of course we need more money. Shout out to the state housing bond, and thank you, Buffy Wicks, for that work, super important. And we must think about innovations in construction. I came from a really fascinating panel where we are building, we're building housing with like really, really interesting materials that are driving down the cost at $200,000 a unit. That's where we need to be really forcing all of us to be looking for more examples of. And it's not going to be easy, right? It might actually mean that some of our friends are not going to be happy with us because we are not able to continue to put all of the expectations on housing that our social fabric, social safety net isn't able to meet. But I believe this sort of push to greater alignment at the state level for greater cost containment, ultimately supporting innovation, is where are the principles that we'd like to see at this moment for the state.
Thank you. Joseph, how are you thinking about this? You work in community with congregations and resident leaders all over the state. How are folks talking about government in that context?
Yeah, thank you, Shioni. Can you all hear me? Okay. Shioni, I'm so honored, so inspired by your leadership. Would just echo the gratitude I just also want to name, I know what's on the mind of every dude in the audience right now, which is, how did this skinny brown guy get to be so lucky as to sit in the middle of so many powerful women? If you buy me a drink at happy hour, I will tell you the secret. Truthfully, I feel so humbled to be here because I'm not a policy expert on housing. I'm just a community organizer. But I do love people. And I do believe organizing is primarily about people. People are about issues. People are about policy change. But organizing is about people. And I want to come at this question by sharing two stories of people who I've gotten the chance to accompany over the past couple of months, two survivors of the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire in Los Angeles. One is named Miriam Gomez, the other is Donnie Kinsey. Miriam is an immigrant from Guatemala. She was cleaning homes in the Palisades the day that the fires broke out. She actually didn't even know the fires were breaking out. The owner of the home that she was cleaning actually called her and said, "You need to get out or you're gonna die." She escaped barely in her car. She drove back to Hollywood where she lives, and she's now out of a job. She lost income. She also lives in an apartment in Hollywood that is unaffordable for her, and at the same time that she lost her job, her landlord is trying to increase her rent by getting around state and city rent stabilization laws by charging them $400 a month for parking. The second person, Donnie Kinsey, who I mentioned, is a third-generation Altadenian whose family immigrated from the South. He's African-American. His family left Tulsa at the time of the race riots 3 generations ago. His family was able to enter the middle class, like so many other black and brown families in Los Angeles, moving into Altadena at a time where there were very few other opportunities because of redlining to enter the middle class. Donnie lost 3 homes: his grandparents' home, his parents' home, and his home in the fires. He lost his art studio. He is a teacher, and he now is couch surfing, sleeping on couches and in rooms of family and friends because he can't find a place to live for less than $2,500 a month, which is a lot of money for him. These two stories for me are a window into the answer to this question. What can the state do differently? What can the state reimagine? There's 3 things I would mention. And so much of this comes to me through my experience in Vienna. I was so blessed to go to Vienna, Austria last year with a delegation of state legislators and philanthropy leaders and community organizers. I was there with Shola. We cut some rug together late at night. We worked hard and played hard in Vienna. But in Vienna, they have found a model of investing in affordable housing that I find to be so inspiring. They fund the construction, the rehabilitation, and protection for tenants at a scale and ratio that is unparalleled to us in California. They invest $1 billion a year for affordable housing construction in a city of 2 million people. That produces 6,000 units of affordable housing every year, subsidized affordable housing. Here in California, over the past couple of years, 2023 and 2024, we produced an average of 15,000 units per year in a state that's 20 times the size of Austria. So we've got to find new ways of generating revenue, of reorganizing the resources that are already there through one-stop shops, for example. That's one. We have to reimagine financing. Number 2, I think we have to do some systemic reimagining. And I think that requires us to find ways of helping government deliver for people and to tell the story about the ways in which government is delivering. I am aware of a poll that was done last year by the LA Times, where paradoxically, voters across the state, by and large, agree, overwhelmingly actually, that we are in the midst of an affordability crisis. Voters also believe, a majority, that government should do something about the housing crisis, that government has a role to play. But paradoxically, 60% of voters in the poll do not believe they or anyone they know will ever benefit from anything government does on the housing crisis. We've got to change that. We've got to streamline processes. We've got to create new efficiencies. We've got to make it cheaper for developers to build. And number 3, we have to change the narrative about housing and affordability. And many of you are at the vanguard of that. And we should shine a light in the way that Vienna shines a light on success stories of social housing in their country of Austria, to the point that people there see housing as a public utility in the way that we see schools and parks and our water systems as public utilities. And those are the three things I think the state could do that would be a form of reimagining.
Veronica, I'm going to go to you next and let you share a bit. You're sitting in an interesting place trying to serve some of our most struggling neighbors. How do you think about the state's role in supporting that work?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is shifting to center the improve the actual experiences of the folks that are accessing all of these programs and services, right? I think that as many of these programs and initiatives have been taken to scale and bureaucracy has gotten involved, it seems to have forgotten about what does this actually translate to on the ground for people who are trying to access the services and also the organizations trying to do the work. And so when I was thinking about what does the state do, right? The state creates or manages resources, funding streams to create and preserve affordable housing, to fund emergency services. It also is responsible for planning, right, and encouraging or forcing our local governments to be responsive to the affordable housing needs and homeless services. They also are responsible and have some say in terms of land use, right, and what that looks like across the state, and of course legislation. And so within those four different buckets, I think the first thing is in terms of, and I won't repeat what my fellow panelists said, but I echo everything that they said, but in the first bucket of that, right, in terms of finding and creating or managing resources, I think that we need to have greater alignment. And I'm going to go a little bit more specific when I say that, right? Especially in the context of this current environment where some of those resources that are coming from the federal government are going to shrink, we need to understand what exists, right? Where are there redundancies? Where are there conflicting programs and policies? What can we do possibly to combine or leverage and maximize the resources that we have? That work has not been done. And so we got this boutique program over there that may be wonderful. We got this over here, this in the corner of another part of the state. Certain things happen in the same parts of the state that people don't understand. And so we need to understand what are all the resources that exist for all of these different aspects of getting people housed, keeping them housed, and preventing people from becoming homeless in the first place, and maximize it right now. And we have to do it, again, because unfortunately the resources are going to shrink. We also have to reimagine the policies and protocols that govern that work. A lot of the stuff we do is antiquated. And I said this earlier in one of the sessions, a lot of the processes and policies and all the eligibility stuff is fraud prevention. The center of it is fraud prevention, and we all, I think, agree that taxpayer dollars should be spent the way they're supposed to be spent, right? Yes. But all of the unnecessary barriers, the invasive questions that we have to ask, the triggering ways that we have to engage people in order for them to just get a place to live or get short-term food support or get income, it's ridiculous. And it's based in fraud prevention, not centered in trying to help the people and understand what their experience is. So not only do we need to maximize the resources and understand what we have and reduce duplication and make sure there's alignment, but we really have to do a reimagining and like a real transformation of how we deliver those services, how the COCs are held accountable, how cities and counties are held accountable from the state for the state dollars, and how organizations are held accountable until we see an improvement and stop hearing all these stories we keep hearing. I've heard 3 today in the last session about how people are interacting and experiencing this system that was supposed to be designed to support them. I think the other thing, in terms of planning, we know that the state has sued some cities, et cetera, but I think that there are some opportunities for the state to continue to provide guidance and, yes, provide some strong incentives for our local governments to do their part. The housing element piece is always a big thing, but there's some other opportunities for the state government to push and require that local governments partner with them in a way that's meaningful and responsive to the things that folks need. And the land use piece, there's some opportunities there for the state to make some adjustments. I know that's controversial, but nevertheless, it's still an opportunity, right, to create more accessibility for more housing to be built or converted to meet the needs of both the homeless services side as well as the housing side. And then through legislation, right, we've had, raise your hand if you've been a part part of the Bringing California Home effort at any point in the last several years. We've been trying to get some legislative regulated commitments, right, built into the state budget for years so that we're not in the position that we're in right now. We're wondering whether or not HAP or some of the other dollars that are ad hoc are going to push. And so we need some legislation to build in an ongoing commitment and a funding stream for some of these things. But ultimately, again, I'm going to end with what I started with. We have to shift what we're doing to make sure that it's focused on improving the experience of the people that are trying to access the resources, because that is not at the center of any conversation that I've been a part of, and it's critical.
I'm going to come back to you, Libby. We heard a lot from each of you about the large-scale transformations that would help us move towards a different set of outcomes. But as the mayor of Oakland, you got to experience all kinds of roadblocks that made it difficult to move those changes forward, both at the state and the local level. Can you talk about how you experience those challenges both at a political and an implementation level, and what you've learned from that, what you take from that around how we should be approaching things differently?
In 1999, I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ledge assistant to the president of the Oakland City Council. And the first project I got assigned to work on was the Fruitvale BART Transit Village. Yes, I mean, what an amazing project, right? But let's talk about the resilience that that team had to show to get that thing done. By the time we actually broke ground, and I'm proud, my little signatures on the crossbeam, it had taken 17 years, and the capital stack had 32 sources of funding for what is one of the most inspirational community-based projects in the country. 32 sources. And some of those sources had rules, I'll give you an example. The federal money strictly prohibited use of local hiring rules. The city of Oakland's money mandated local hiring rules. And so how you reconciled every single little bespoke and customized funding source to get this good, beautiful thing built was mind-numbing. So when I went to, and you know what, we've almost all up here, how many people have gone to Vienna? Let's hear it for Vienna. You go to Vienna and they show you a capital stack of one of these projects, and it has 3 sources in it. And the government doesn't just do the gap financing, it actually does the construction loan. So it's the primary funder of these projects. It's simple, they do it year after year, and they are producing all these projects. So I know at local government, we talk a lot about streamlining permitting, and the state legislature does too, but we need to streamline financing. And Shola, you talked about this potential proposal. I want to shout out Sarah Karlinski when she was at Spur, and now she's at Turner. We'll just call it the Sarah Karlinski report, that actually said, we need to consolidate all these different funding programs because they're actually adding cost and time to the production of desperately needed affordable housing. The last thing I want to say, talk about, as the mayor, how did the state government get in my way? My last couple years as mayor, I was the head of the Big City Mayors Association, and we came up with this proposal called HAP. How many people know about HAP? It's a very good thing. It's helping, yeah, is it not a good thing? It's a beautiful thing. Because let me tell you, as the mayor, we decided to take an approach when we had a homeless encampment or a community of unhoused people that were in a place that was dangerous, on the roadway. We created a system called cabin communities where we wanted to actually allow this community to stay together and to move onto a lot that was nearby to the location, the geography that that community had chosen. But to use federal money, homelessness money, to actually keep a community together, I always said it was like solving a Rubik's Cube with a pair of tweezers, because this dollar could only be spent on a veteran. This dollar had to be spent on someone who had a child. This dollar had to be spent on someone with a diagnosed disability, not an undiagnosed. This dollar could be spent on services in a shelter, but not on operations. So I could give you counseling, but not feed you. So that stupidity in government has got to go, and HAP was like our hack, right? HAP was to create flexible dollars so we could fill in the gaps that this ridiculous system of bespoke programs was creating, that was not designed to actually address a holistic community. And I'm getting back to this holistic thing again. Every year, we would go and ask for HAP, and I'm just not gonna name names, but like, because it wasn't somebody's idea, it wasn't their branded initiative, it was very, very hard to get every year. We'd save it at the last minute. I think it got kind of watered down in the end, and I don't think it's actually in the budget this year. And so that's the kind of tension that exists. And so I ask you as advocates, as people who actually understand these systems, we can't keep creating new bespoke specialized programs. We've got to start fixing the programs we have, making them flexible, making them meet communities where communities are and work in the real world, not just on the piece of paper or in the press release, and also reward politicians that are not just doing something new, but actually making what we have now better. I know that's not as sexy, but it is so needed.
Veronica, you have dealt with this fragmentation in so many different ways. Can you talk about how the fragmentation of the service delivery system is complicating the efforts of HOPICS and your peers to really reach the communities that need your support?
Yeah, thanks, Shioni. I think we know that most folks that are either precariously housed or already actually unhoused are interacting with multiple systems, right, that are state-driven and are administered at the local level. And I think that having to jump through all those hoops and do 3 to 5 different application processes where there may be conflicting or contradictory policies, protocols, or even definitions or terms, right? Like something as simple as how things are defined and what terms mean for different systems is problematic. And it just adds to the anxiety and the barriers for folks who are trying to figure out where they're gonna lay their head at tonight or where their children are gonna lay their head tonight. And so, you know, HOPICS, we operate as an outreach provider, an interim housing provider, as a permanent housing provider, substance use, mental health, reentry, you name it. And so we are acutely aware of the disconnects to systems that the same person, the one person that we are serving in all those different capacities need to access. And so I think that, you know, for me, I'm excited because I'm honored to be a part of the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, and that's where multiple departments and agencies sit. And I think that there are some opportunities. I talked about alignment a little bit earlier, but there are some opportunities for the conflicting policies that continue to come up. Now, we got enough information about it, Shioni, now, right? We understand where the gaps are. We understand where the conflicting policies or the policies that just don't work together well are creating barriers, and I think it's time for us to fix that, right? And so I talked about the resource allocation and some other stuff in my previous comments, but I think there's an opportunity, certainly knowing that some of them are federally regulated, but there are some things that the state departments have control over. If they just step back and look at what the interaction is across these different systems, they can make some adjustments to some specific examples, you know, that I'll give. One of the main ones is we always talk, you know, I say economic stability is housing stability, right? And I think that one of the drivers for folks who are able and interested in increasing their income is as soon as some people increase their income, not to the point where they can stand on their own, but increase it a little bit, then their benefits are at risk, right? That's one of the most glaring examples of something that just does not make sense. And certainly we want people to work towards upward mobility, but when they get ahead a little bit, now their SNAP is gone or other things. So things like that, right, that are very real, that impact people's basic needs, that sometimes seemingly disincentivize people from wanting to engage in some of those other activities or have upper mobility, because our systems need to be brought up to date with the existing economic landscape, with the amount of things that people cost, and then what it actually costs to be able to survive and afford your own food, right? Or whatever the mainstream benefit is a perfect example of something that doesn't make sense, that the state does have some ability to make some adjustments to.
Shared two stories about people and families who have really been failed by our housing system. Can you share kind of how you're thinking about the most important things the state can do to actually step up and fill those gaps so that low-income renters have access to safe, stable housing?
Yeah, I'll name a couple things. One on the sort of production side and the other on the renter protection and keeping families in their home side. Going back to Vienna for a moment, you know, one of the things I was so struck by is the way in which power is distributed differently in Vienna compared to our system. I look at what Donald Trump is doing right now at the national level. In many ways, he is consolidating power in the executive in order to weaken government and its capacity to redistribute wealth and opportunity. There's a different kind of redistributing, reshuffling power that is needed for more egalitarian ends. And what I saw in Vienna, different from our system, is that instead of developers telling cities what they want to do, the state in Vienna told developers the kind of housing that was going to be needed. They set standards for the number of units that need to be built. They create multi-decade plans. They then acquire land through land banking. They shape land use and zoning. They provide subsidies and low-interest loans like revolving loans, similar to some of the innovations in LA and the Bay Area. And then they cap rents. Here, as I understand it in our system, again, I'm no policy expert, but so often developers tell cities what they want to build and then either try to extract benefit from them or subsidize it so that it's more affordable. And so the result is that nobody except for developers, mostly for-profit, more kind of market-driven, profit at all sort of costs, interests are the ones who are shaping housing policy in our state. And that's not serving our current or our future needs. And so some kind of redistributing of power such that the state is bringing interests together and driving an agenda would be something exciting. Because so often when our leaders go to their cities to say the kinds of housing that they want to see, the finger gets pointed at the state. And it's said, well, the state isn't kicking in enough resources. We go to our state legislators, they tell us the cities aren't getting their act together, they're too captured by NIMBYs in our communities. There needs to be someone in charge who is consolidating interests and providing the kind of leadership, bold leadership that we need at a time like this. The second thing is I don't want to leave out the needs of renters and people who are currently struggling to pay their rent. People like Miriam, people like Donnie, so many millions of people in our state. It's part of why I'm so excited by the State Housing Advocacy Committee, which Shioni and Housing California and many others are a part of. It's a big tent coalition of developers, of financiers, policy experts, and also tenant advocates and organizers to build a more united and popular front, to increase the production and acceleration of affordable housing, but to also protect renters. And we need things in our state like a stronger rent cap, because AB 1482, which was passed in 2019, is becoming weaker and weaker as inflation rises and as rents rise. We know we also need to inject new resources for affordable housing, things like AB 736, Buffy Wicks's $10 billion housing bond. We need to stop junk fees and the loopholes that landlords like Miriam Gomez's are taking advantage of to go around the system to raise rents. And then we know we need to regulate the use of AI to collude in setting rent prices. These are some of the things we think the state can and should do this year.
Shola, you've worked in housing, finance, and real estate in both the public and the private sectors. What aspects of the existing affordable housing finance system should be sustained, and what should be improved? And where do brand new solutions need to be brought to bear so that we can do our work better?
I really didn't want to follow Joseph. Like, can't you just like listen to him for like an hour? Like so thank you, Joseph. I think we've talked a lot about the challenges that exist within the system. And I'll note for everyone, these all existed pre-January 20th. So I just like, there's a moment of just like acknowledgement of the significant threat that our residents, our country, our industry is facing. And our state, while we are the 5th largest economy in the world, is better positioned than most to respond. This is not going to be business as usual. So yes, there should be better alignment. Yes, we need to continue to drive down costs, but we also are in the fight for our lives and protecting at Eden the 25,000 residents who call on us to provide home. How do we ensure the 8,500 residents who rely on Section 8 remain in their home? So we're doing an exercise thinking about like what are our sort of risk options that we need to be thinking about, and I'm sure all of you are having similar conversations like that. So yes, we absolutely need to be doing this sort of this sort of important structural organizational redesign, and we have to make sure we don't lose what we have. I think there are 3 things that, as someone who's spent a lot of time in government, also working for my mayor, Mayor Libby, that really were important for me here and then in my time in New York City. One was data-informed and people-centric. So, and the reason why that's important is, again, we are being told government can't work. I think it's really important that we talk about the stories and the impact of the investments that are being made. How many units are being created, what the broader economic impact is to our communities because of the housing work that is happening. Those stories, they're not going to get out through our newsletters, y'all. Like, we need more than that, right? And it needs to be a steady drumbeat to our folks in Washington, because that is where this fight will happen. 2 is the importance of innovation. I want to give a shout out to the Fund for the Bay's Future, who supported embedding, emerging leaders and supporting innovation and really important policy work within local government. That does not get funded, as the mayor knows. There's no PAR, there's no budget line for innovation analyst, right? That is not something, that's not an argument that you want to make with your city council when you're thinking about really important resources. So government really does need that philanthropic, that private support to try things, to have the ability to try things and to fail and to try again. And then lastly, I think it's the importance of transparency. Again, the other side is not going to say what they are doing, but we have to continue to talk about the importance, the impact of the public dollar. That's why they will support the $10 billion housing bond if they understand where their money is going and if they see that we are delivering more units for a lower cost.
Say on the topic, and we're reaching time, so I think I'm going to ask each of you to share one closing thought around something that's giving you hope and promise. Where do you see promising change, and how do you hope to see that move us towards the future? And Veronica, I might start with you.
I think, there's been glimmers of really effective programming across our state. The Encampment Resolution Fund is an example of an opportunity to understand what all aspects of the work need to be in order to move people, right, keep them housed, and help them sustain. I think it's a really good example of when you fully fund the comprehensive resources and services needed, it can be done. Home Key, I think, has been another glimmer of hope to bring, and we know that nothing is perfect, but I think there's some great innovations that have happened across our state, and I hope we can continue to move in that vein to take those types of innovations to scale. I also, even though it's a bad word right now, the racial equity work, I'm gonna keep lifting it up because enough data shows that Black folks, brown folks, indigenous, and other people of color have disparate outcomes as it relates to access and the how they matriculate through programs, and obviously the exit outcomes. And so the fact that in some corners of the state, I've seen a commitment, right, that will continue to work towards addressing those disparities and reducing them, I think is helpful. I think the other thing, and I know this is a little bit of a twist, during the pandemic and even now, just because of the very difficult economic landscape, I feel like more people who may have been on the other side of this work understand how close someone can be to not being able to make ends meet, right? And people during the pandemic saw people fall out of housing. They saw things they have never seen before. Now with the price of eggs, that's all people keep talking about. And everything else, though, people see how close you can be from being a paycheck away. And so in terms of the advocacy efforts and getting more people online to support this work, I think that I'm hopeful about that. And then I'm just hopeful, look at all the folks in this room, right? Even though we are fighting for our lives, as Shola said, look at all the people here that are committed to getting us to the other side. And I think if we stick together, right, if we don't fight for the breadcrumbs that are in front of us as the resources start to shrink and reduce, and as some of our organizations and communities have to make difficult decisions, and if we remember what's at the core of why we're here in the first place, whatever your reason is, and we commit to sticking alongside each other, even if we don't necessarily philosophically agree, then we'll be here in 4 years. And we may look different, but we'll be here, right? And we will have been more thoughtful and more meaningful with the little bit of resources that we have. So I'm hopeful because you all are here and I'm here with you.
That's great. Two sources of hope. And maybe two quotes. One, the monsters we're fighting right now, the kind of demonic forces at play in our society, remind me of something that Friedrich Nietzsche used to write. He said that in the work of fighting monsters, we must ourselves be careful not to become monstrous. The other quote is from Dorothy Day, the founder of the Catholic Worker, who once wrote, "The greatest revolution is the revolution of the human heart." And I believe that there is a prophetic, almost a spiritual element to our work that transcends the politics and economics that we've been discussing. And this for me was embodied going back to Vienna, which is not a perfect system. In Vienna, immigrants have a really hard time getting into affordable housing. In fact, there are very restrictive immigration laws. If you are fortunate enough to enter the country, there are restrictions on residency and education and language to be able to get into affordable housing. There is deep anti-immigrant sentiment in that society, as there is in ours. But when I was there, I visited something called a solidarity flat. Solidarity flats are units or rooms in units where people, more established Viennese who have lived in affordable housing and social housing for a while, open up a room, open up a unit for newer arrivals. They ask themselves the question, what can I do for my neighbor? How can I be a source of love and light to people who are like me, trying to make a better life? And I asked one person who was in charge of a solidarity flat, what makes you do this? And he said, life is ephemeral. He said, life is short, and I simply want to widen my circle of human concern. The existence of solidarity flats, for me, is a source of great hope, for the existence of affordable housing and what it does not just for the economics of a society, but also the spirit of a society, because it creates more empathetic bridges where we can see the humanity in one another. The last thing I'll say is the crisis that is still unfolding in Los Angeles is breeding enormous opportunities to set new precedents and examples for how we create the kind of permanently affordable housing our communities need long term. I'm seeing people rise to the occasion, supporting one another, acting as a form of solidarity flat to each other. And there are policy possibilities right now in Los Angeles that are typically not available to us in times of non-crisis. And I really hope that we can push with people, prophetic leaders like Secretary Tamika Moss in the governor's office, really bold solutions that will help us really set a new precedent for affordable housing development in our state.
So what gives me hope is my 9-year-old daughter, who is just the best. And so I'll leave that as that keeps me going. The team at Eden recently opened a family veteran development in unincorporated Alameda County, Crescent Grove. And over the course, I'm going to get the number of days wrong, 3-4 days, we moved in over 70 families into this development. It was amazing. Yes, shout out. Amazing leadership by Darnell Williams and so many others. And to follow those families who were getting the keys to their units, to introduce them to their neighbors, to give them a little welcome basket, and for them to be thanking, me and or other team members, because it was the first time that their child had a door because they've never had their own room, or it was the first time, they had nice appliances, their words, not mine. That gives me hope. That is why I do this work. I know so many of us do this across the state. We need more of it. We need it to be cheaper. We need it to be bigger. And that is the work that is in front of us. So that is what gives me hope. Thank you.
What gives me hope is a mom named Tiffany, because I think she represents the possibility of what I am inspired by as a growing early wealth building movement. And I want to bring a non-housing thing into the room, because remember, all these things are interconnected. In Oakland, we give low-income moms a $500 college savings account for their children at birth and a financial coach. And Tiffany also got a zero-interest, no-recourse, so in other words, if you don't pay it back, it doesn't hurt your credit rating, loan through Kiva to start the first Pacific Islander worker cooperative making leis, which was a celebration and an empowerment from her culture. She contacted me not so long ago to tell me that she became an Oakland homeowner. And if y'all have looked at Oakland home prices lately, that is a huge accomplishment. And she did that. The reason she bothered to reach out to me is she said it would never have happened without her brilliant baby financial coach. So this college savings account actually gave her this vision as a saver, as an investor. And we had her on the stage when Vice President Kamala Harris came to Oakland to celebrate for us an accomplishment. We raised privately $50 million in a quasi-endowment for more Tiffany's and her family. And she said that the importance of programs like the Oakland Promise were not so much the money, but that it showed her and her children that they deserved to live lives of dignity. And so what gives me hope, is this idea that we as a state, and if you don't know what Cal Kids is, come stop me in the hall and ask me and tell me what my future career plans are. Love to tell you about them. But we as a state are actually making one of the most ambitious investments in early wealth building in the country. That gives me hope. And then finally, Chione, as beautiful as you looked last night with the orchids in your hair, at those Housing Justice Awards, the true beauty was in the leadership and the talent and the commitment and the love that is in this room. And if we are all pushing in the same direction, if we are all fighting for that same vision, I believe there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. That gives me hope.
Thanking our panelists, we're going to wrap. And please join us in the hall across the exhibit room for our happy hour and cocktail reception. Thank you again, and as Libby said, thank you for bringing your beauty, your wisdom, and your commitment to this work. We couldn't do it without all of us.